Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree with everything that I've heard. I think the be it resolved statement in this resolution is beautiful. To read it, we encourage the schools of Idaho to provide children with the knowledge, strength, and virtue of a free people by viewing the history both clearly and wholly, not only the offenses, but also the triumphs. I love that. I think this is History Day for me, I feel like. But I read this pretty closely, multiple times, sat in my office a lot, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what was it that was gnawing at me about what the resolution said it wants to do versus what I suspected was going to play out in reality. And after you read the reasoning in the whereases, and how it essentially singles out one book as the obstacle to doing what we want to do, this resolution to me makes it feel like we're trying to protect a certain type of history instruction. The assumption baked into this resolution is that all we want to do is teach our children a settled history, a clear and whole settled history. We just want to walk them through what happened, what were the events, who was there, when did it happen, what was the outcome. Now, history is a long series of successes and mistakes, no doubt about that, and that's why teaching history is so vital, right? But the history that's in our kids' textbooks, and I think the history that some of us want to get back to, isn't a history of the facts. It's a strategic compilation of certain facts. And while history is what happened, it's also whether and how we think about what those things were. Now I'm just talking. So what do I mean? Let's talk about Thomas Jefferson for a minute. A towering American figure. A hero at the dawn of our young nation. You can't understand the experiment of America without understanding and reading about Thomas Jefferson and reading his own words. He was a genius. His intellect, his vision, his words laid the foundation not only for our political culture, our DNA, our form of government, but also our public higher education system in this country, which, against all the odds, has lasted hundreds of years. You can't understand America without understanding him. But it's also true that when he was my age, 43, 44 years old, he had unconsensual sex with a child.
Mr. Speaker, I think we're probably getting into the territory of some speculation and some controversy.
Mr. Speaker, it is precisely my point that this is well-established fact, and for some to think that it is speculation is precisely my point. The history that we want to teach our kids is the one that equips them with the full, clear, and whole set of facts. And that is the one I'm trying to articulate here as an example to illustrate why I'm going to vote no against this resolution.
You have the floor to debate. You've heard the objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I say non-consensual because she was a child, her name was Sally Hemings, and he owned her. And on many occasions, she became pregnant with his children, and then he enslaved his own children. Now, why am I saying this? I'm not saying this to be divisive. I'm not saying this to make anybody feel guilty or ashamed. I'm not saying this to convince you to hate America. I am not. I'm saying this because if we want to teach history wholly and clearly, and certainly we wouldn't teach that subject matter to our youngest kids, that would be inappropriate. But my point is that our nation's most revered founders are not unimpeachable heroes. They're not deities. And I'm nervous that this resolution reinforces this idea that the way we have taught about them historically is the best way, is the only way. And this resolution makes me feel like some Idahoans prefer the grayscale version of American history, where we don't talk about these uncomfortable truths that fill in the gaps and that provide color to an otherwise grayscale history. And I feel like we are becoming increasingly sensitive and uncomfortable and unable to talk about some of these things. And that those things are the reason that we have a lot of the same problems generation after generation after generation. Now, discomfort does not equal guilt. And morally appropriate feelings of guilt don't have to be packaged with equal parts of shame. But being able to discuss a clear and whole history is essential for us to grow our collective well-being as communities, as a state. And growth, unlike proficiency, is not always comfortable. The hard work of doing better is uncomfortable, but I think it's worth it. I mean, I ask my kids to do uncomfortable things all the time. Do their chores, do their homework. They'll be stronger, they'll be sharper, they'll be more resilient as a result. So, let me just conclude by saying two things. I'm going to vote no for these two reasons. Number one, this resolution contains false statements of fact on lines 13 and 14. The 1619 project doesn't suggest people should be ashamed because of their race. I have my copy right here. If I'm wrong, please tell me on what page I should go to correct that misunderstanding. And second, I have no idea what problem we're trying to spotlight here. I keep hearing about divisiveness. I think I said this last year. What is this divisiveness? Who's being divided on these sets of facts? What are the questions that we disagree on? I think what's happening here and around the country, let me close by saying this, is I think that when certain historical facts are presented to people, some people feel bad on a moral level. But then I think they are misconstruing that feeling as someone else's malicious intent. And this resolution, I think, reinforces that tendency, and I don't think that's a good political habit for us. I'm not going to ask you to vote no. We all know how we're going to vote, but I'm going to be voting no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Is there further debate?